your presence, that's where I want to be.
Good morning. Open your Bibles to 2 Timothy chapter 3. We're going to start a new series today, I believe. I wanted to get in some stuff today and it just won't all fit. If you ever had that, you got to add on. So today we're going to start talking about inside the thoughts and the behaviors of narcissists. And I started studying on covert narcissism, and I really wanted to start there, but we just can't. We have to get into the basics of why certain people think the way they do. Because as Christians, we want to fix everybody. Anybody else? If I just love someone enough, if I just pray enough, I can change people. So we need to know what we're dealing with in these end times, because not only are we dealing with it in our homes and sometimes with our children, our grandchildren, but we're dealing with it in churches. And next week I want to talk about the narcissistic parents, the father and the mother, and narcissistic churches and leaders. I wanted to get there this morning, but we just have to start off. I don't want to give you the meat before the potatoes. Okay. The 2 Timothy chapter 3, it says, see, when I cried before, we had a good touching time before, so now I'm going to have tears and I might need my glasses here. This know also that in the last days, perilous, that word perilous there actually means fierce, wild, savage times, hostile times are upon us. And how many know we are definitely living in a different age? If you look back 20 years, wow, you never heard of the stories, you never saw the things that are happening in our world today. God knows everything that's going to happen, that shall happen, and he wants to prepare his people. And he's come to heal the brokenhearted. And I feel a lot of people, the reason why I want to share this message is not to sling around terms or to label people, but it's to heal people that have been serving God with their whole heart, and they've run into these kind of people in their lives. And as a result, it's wounded them. And God doesn't want his people wounded, but we also have to stop being naive, and we have to know our enemy and know how he works, know who we can help, and then know there's some people we can't help. And it's hard sometimes for us to think that there's limits and boundaries, but God has limits and boundaries on who he can help. And he said the sower sows the word. Some receive, some don't, so if that happened to him, guess what? It's going to happen to us. So we have to know where God's leading us. Many of us have taken turns. Most of the narcissistic people, in fact, all the narcissistic people I've met are in church. And that's sad, because you think you're going to find healthy, whole, awesome people in church, which we do, but also there are tares. There are tares, and then you run into a few goats now and then. And everyone lighten up just a little bit. Okay. Hopefully you're not sitting next to a goat. No. Now I got you laughing. All right. Perilous times shall come, for men shall be what? Lovers of their own selves. Now we are in a day of selfies. Everybody wants to take, and it's okay to have some of it, but you can tell the narcissistic type people that they just want to take pictures of themselves all the time. They adore themselves. And there is a limit, okay? But they're going to be lovers of themselves, covetousness, boasters, proud, blasphemies, disobedient to parents. What a day that parents, they give their lives for their children, and they're turned around and the kids slap them on the face and say, you've done me wrong. Or there's counseling now that they go to counselors, and what are they doing? They're pitting their kids against their parents. And I've dealt with a lot of parents like this. And you have to know, when you've done the best you can, you got to be careful who you send your children to counseling in this hour. There's a lot of stuff out there. They say they're Christians, but they're not. They're not even biblical. They're not following biblical guidelines. And there's going to be a whole lot of stuff mixed in that you shouldn't have, a mixture in counseling. But here it says they're going to be disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affections, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, and despisers of those that are good. In other words, persecution. There's going to be persecution for standing up and doing the right thing, because many times people around you want to do the wrong thing, They're going to be despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God. We've talked a lot about this. Now we're having entertainment instead of worship. There's a place for entertainment, but when we come to church, we need to worship God. Our focus isn't on us and how blessed we are. It's about Him. So we have to keep that, because otherwise you're going to have a form of godliness. And this is what happens with the people that are lovers of themselves. The actual word narcissism is not in the Bible. But lovers of self, if you look up that word lovers of self, there is narcissism. Excessive self-love, vainglory, selfishness, overconfidence, pride, self-worship, superiority, arrogance, and boastfulness. Now, we have a problem in our culture today because back in 2010, there was an announcement that was made on the New York Times internet site that narcissism was no longer going to be called a mental disorder. And the reason why they said that is because our whole culture is full of narcissism. So now narcissism is the new normal, but it is not normal to the Christian. Amen? In fact, this is something that Jesus had to deal with. The more I was studying this, it's like, what's a Bible illustration of narcissistic people? The Pharisees. The Pharisees always wanted to be seen. They always wanted to be trumpeted on what they did. They're praying, they're fasting. Everything they did to what? Be seen of men. So here we're dealing with the same spirit with a different title, but it's still this spirit that puts God down. It uses God, and this is what's happening with religion. Religion is a big business now. And we aren't into the big, we want a relationship with the Lord, and we want to come back to the simplicity of worshiping Him and loving His Word, knowing that there's going to be a day that we give account to Him in our body for what we've done. Amen? So we live in the fear of the Lord, which is healthy for us. But here in 2010, the narcissistic personality disorder, characterized by an inflated sense of self-importance and the need for constant attention, has been eliminated from the upcoming manual of mental disorders, which psychiatrists use to diagnose mental illness. So now if they don't have a manual that diagnoses it, guess what? There's going to be a lot of people undiagnosed with this problem. And because there's going to be a lot of abuse and manipulation, and people aren't going to be able to get help. And that's my concern. So I'm so thankful that someone told me one day, well, what you're dealing with is a narcissist. And I was like, what's that? And it put me on because in Christianity, we don't talk about this stuff. You know, we talk about how to be blessed and how you're the head and all this stuff. And real issues are so many times not dealt with. Well, we got to deal with the real stuff, right? So now narcissism was eliminated from the handbook of mental illness. But according to God's handbook, He said this is going to be a big problem. Lovers of self is going to be huge in these end times. And He doesn't want us to be abused. He doesn't want you to be taken advantage of. He doesn't want religious condemnation on you. Because a lot of times when you find out what the root, today we're going to go into some of the thinking. If you know how people think, sometimes you can't change how people think. There's sometimes we all have some of these traits. Maybe you're a little selfish and maybe you're a little jealous or envious, but these are traits you can, repent of and work on, ask God to help you and put the word in your life, because we're all growing, right? But there is there's different levels of narcissism, and there's different kinds. And this is why it's so hard, because sometimes you're just used to this one type of blatant, selfish, bold ego type of a guy or women. I want you to know there's no gender in this. I have seen as many women as men with this type of problem. And so you have to know that there's different levels and different spectrums. Some might have it more than others, but the root causes we're going to look at today so we can understand it. If we have an understanding of the damage of someone's thinking, then we won't let them define you. If you think someone's superior and that they're smarter than you and that they control you and they manipulate you and you're underneath that thinking, then now you're going to let them tell you how to think, you end up being controlled and manipulated by these damaged people. See what I'm saying? And damaged political leaders and damaged pastors and ministers. So this is in every area of our culture. So we need to have heads up of what's going on. Because this disorder It has a rigid and unhealthy pattern of thinking and behaving. So even though you think, well, maybe this is just me, if you look on the history of this person's life, you're going to see a history of this pattern. See what I mean? Patterns that go in and out. I look back at certain leaders, and I look back in churches, and I see staff abuse. We'll get more into that next week. And fathers and how they treat their children and how they damage their children with this type of behavior and thinking. But so many of us didn't know what this was, and we have to deal with it now because we're all affected. And we have to also get a hold of it so that we can teach our children at a young age when they're being formed. The number one thing we have to teach them is empathy. Teach them not to be selfish. Teach them how to put themselves in other people's shoes. What are we doing? We're creating more narcissistic children. You're the princess. You're the doll. You're the, over making these kids feel that they are totally entitled. And you know what I'm saying? It's spoiling them, and spoil is a good word. We're destroying them from the inside. It's okay to compliment and to give encouragement to and validation. We need all those things. But to an excess, we're talking about excessiveness. It creates problems, and children develop these things when they're young. So we want to teach them how to be empathetic, teach them how to care, teach them how to share while we still can, and they're still in our households. So it's an unhealthy pattern of thinking and behaving, because what happens is leads to problems in relationships everywhere, in their work. If you say, well, I'm not dealing with this, you're going to run into a boss. Because a lot of these narcissistic people are very successful and they're in leadership positions because they have tunnel vision. Basically, they don't care who they hire, who they fire. They have no emotional connections, so it's very easy for them to go on the top. They'll do whatever they have to do on top. And I've dealt with a lot of leaders that their vision was so tunnel, all they could think about was what they wanted to get done. Didn't matter if this person's mom died. Get over the funeral and then you come back to work. And I'd say, let them go and take, nope, this is more important. When there's other people to fill in positions. That's totally wrong. We in the faith movements we've come out of is don't grieve. Grieving is selfish. Grieving's bad. They're in heaven. Well, I'm sorry, we're not yet. And we have a soul, and we have to deal with that soul, and we have to give people time to grieve, healthily grieve, so that they, grieving it's in the Bible, in the Testament. It's healthy to grieve. So, but these leaders, they don't care about you really. It's about their ministry or their political office. And you see a lot of this narcissism in our movie stars, celebrities, in our politicians, and unfortunately in our ministries. And this is the heroes that our kids look up to. So if they're looking up to this type of behavior, they're going to think that's normal. They're going to think, I want to copy that. And if it's a narcissistic dad or mom, the kids copy that behavior because, well, dad doesn't give me any validation. I guess the biggest compliment is to be like him. So I'm going to copy and I'm going to act like him. So now big narc has a little narc. And the problem with narcissism is that others are always blamed for the problems being faced. Excessive self-love, vainglory, selfishness, overconfidence, pride, self-worship, superiority, arrogance, and boastfulness are just a few words. The Bible talks about all these subjects, but it confirms here that we are seriously in trouble in our culture, that we no longer address narcissism. Because it lets us know, wow, this is going to go undiagnosed. We're going to have more and more of it because now it's normal, so we don't want to say it's a disorder. So, again, classic narcissists gravitate towards the limelight. There are different kinds of narcissists, and there's a certain type that want to be seen. I've been around a lot of these, unfortunately, in ministry, and if they're not on the stage, they can only go so long without being seen. They have to be seen. I could never understand that. I'm like, why do you, but there's something in them that has to have the limelight. Now there's another kind of narcissist, which we'll probably get into more next week, which is the covert narcissist. Now, I thought, how can I explain this so people get it? Now everyone has a belly button, right? You either have an innie or an outie. So the outie is the overt narcissist. The innie is the covert, inward, introvert, covered, hidden. So there's different kinds of narcissists. There's those that are real blatant and easy to see. The most dangerous type to me is the covert. That's the innie. They're hidden. They're excellent manipulators. They know how to put on a mask. They know what you want to hear. They tell you what you want to hear. They play you. And they're wolves in sheep's clothing. God doesn't want us to mingle with wolves in sheep's clothing. Right? And if we're in ministry, and our ministry is all about us, it's not really about the Lord, that's narcissistic because they always put God second. Not loving him with all they love themselves. I mean, no, that's absolutely horrible. But it's the narcissist's refusal to accept responsibility for his behavior that causes so much pain for everyone else. We deal with the woundedness, the staff, the family. If it's a lot of people say it's just the men, but there's a lot of narcissistic women too. And the poor, gentle, loving husband gets dealt with so controlling and abusive. And these wounds, if not dealt with, they go on forever. And you think there's something wrong with you. They think, why can't I fix that person? Why can't I pray enough? If I just prayed more, if I just loved more, maybe I could be the person that they need. And you have to know the signs that there's some people you just can't help. Okay? And Jesus, I don't think he was too nice to the Pharisees. So narcissism begins in childhood for many and becomes coping mechanisms from early childhood experiences, sometimes of feeling rejected, unloved, uncared for, and punished. So they put up, like they call it, a false self. They don't know how to deal with how to inwardly, and sad because a lot of times the parents will give them a lot of material things, but they never teach them how to work through emotions. They never teach that you're going to be loved even if you've done something wrong. So there's a lot of fear-based, and a lot of lying. There's a lot of lying. Narcissists lie at the drop of a hat. Why they've learned how to get out of tough situations because there's a lot of fear and shame-based in them. The mental health industry's eliminated narcissism as a disorder, so it's going to be hard now to diagnose. But I want to share with you what their manual did say. According to the manual, when it was written, you have to have 5 out of these 9 things to really be considered narcissistic personality disorder. And not just one of them, because some of us can all have something we need to work on, so I don't want you to just go slinging terms around, but you've got to have 5 of these to have and when you have them, trust me, when you meet people with these, you will know, because your life will be like a tornado. And if you're married to one of these people, you feel empty, you can never please them, it's always your fault. It's like you never measure up. You're always trying, but they're never trying, but it's always your fault. And there's just a real shame that they can put on you. And unfortunately, it is in Christianity. And a lot of Christians don't deal with this stuff. And that's why I like to, because a lot of the world teaches it, but they don't teach it the way, according to the Bible, of how we should respond or what we should do. And it's all in there. So basically, this is the new normal, the age of entitlement. What does entitlement mean? The right to have something. Now we have a generation where kids they feel entitled to have stuff. The boomers give their kids, maybe not themselves, but they give them the stuff. So the kids starting to develop these attitudes of, well, I have a right to it. I have a right to it. You know, she has it. I have it. And this age of entitlement. So according to this diagnostic and statistical manual of mental disorders, the 4th edition, the 9 things to look for, and I kind of simplified this in layman's terms. The first one is grandiose, when everyone should serve me. Have you ever met people where they feel like you should serve them? Everything is grandiose. An exaggerated sense of self-importance. They put themselves up a little bit higher and they really feel grandiose about themselves. Number 2 is preoccupation with fantasy. Their thinking is so odd. A lot of these people I've sat down and talked to, the one I'm thinking about, is always success of this unbelievable world fame or something just so out of normal, out of reality of how successful they're going to be. Preoccupied with fantasies of success or power or beauty. Another one I know that was narcissistic, she was always trying to seduce men. And she was a very beautiful girl. But I was like, why do you dress like that and look like that to get the attention of that kind of a guy? She just had to have that attention. There was something inside of her that she didn't feel good about herself unless she was making men basically drool. How many know that's not normal? Preoccupied with this beauty, with their own beauty. They believe they're special. And now this is a different type of narcissist, because they're so special, they can only associate with special people. So if you want money and fame, you're going to only associate with people that have money and fame. So if you're a pastor and you want to be successful, you only, butter up to the rich and the famous in your church. God says in James, don't have respect of persons. You're not supposed to favor the rich over the poor. You're supposed to treat them all the same. Well, people that have that bent to them, this trait in them, they don't care about the brokenhearted, or their whole goal and their whole focus is to go get those rich people in their church. How many know that's wrong for a church? That's not what we're here for. Then they believe they are special. Oh, I did say that. Okay, then it requires excessive admiration, number 4. They like to be admired. Your job, if you're in their life, is to tell them how great they are. And if you don't tell them how great they are, they have no need of you. And if you're a wife to one of these and you no longer tell them how great, they will find someone that does. So these are the kind of people that cheat, because they need that admiration. And if they don't get it from you, they will find it. Unreasonable expectations and a sense of entitlement. I would hang around these pastors. That's my world, 43 years of pastoral. And I'd get around some of these pastors that were over other pastors, and they would tell these pastors of smaller churches what they had to give them for their anniversary or for their birthdays. And I was just like, are you serious? You were told by Pastor so-and-so. She goes, yeah, they want this. They want a living room set. They want this. They want a trip here, and we have to give. And I just tell them, you guys are nuts. That's wrong. That wasn't real well liked there, but I just saw the abuse. I saw the abuse going on in the name of God and in sense of entitlement. And I was like, these people are struggling paying their own church bills. Why do you? But they're entitled. Actually, I helped them for a month. They owe me now. They started some of these churches, so now they feel like they own the pastors. They take advantage of others to achieve their own ends, their own agenda. And a lot of times, people are tools. People are seen as objects. You are there to meet my needs. If you don't meet my needs, I have no need of you. Poof. I don't see you. I don't care. I don't care how you feel. How many know that's not normal? A normal person cares if you're hurting. The Bible says if one hurts, we all hurt. These people have an ability to not care. There's no empathy. That's the next one. They lack empathy. They won't identify, or they can't identify with the feelings and the needs of other people. When we're a body, if one hurts, we all hurt. It's amazing how they just lack empathy. We'll talk about that later. Envious. If you get something, they're entitled, they feel like they should have it too. You can almost see it in their eyes when you have something they want. I could tell you stories on that, don't have time. They show total arrogant and habitual behaviors and attitudes, a lot of pride. And if you are looking for pride being outward, you have to watch out for the innies, because the innies have this smug attitude of, well, there's nothing about you that can help me, so I really don't care to even know you. You wonder if you've offended them, but they don't have time for you. There's just a smugness about them because you're not important. They have this thing that some people are important, and how many know God doesn't see anyone as more important than the other? You're free when you know that just because you have better something or else, someone else has something better than you, and that's why we all need each other. They don't think that way. So in the Bible, now we see the Pharisees. They had the symptoms of narcissism, and let's look at Matthew 6. You guys doing okay? Yeah. Matthew 6, it says, Take heed that you do not do your alms, or you could say your charity, your love, your mercy, your giving, whatever you do, before men to be seen of them. Now, the whole thing about the selfish culture that we're living in, it's all to be seen. It's all about image. What kind of an image, what kind of a brand do you have, right? To be seen of men. Here again, we're talking about excessive. You have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. This is where we walk in the fear of God. We give because we do it as unto the Lord, and God's our rewarder. We don't have to please men, we please him. But it says if you're doing it just to please men, guess what? I hope you enjoyed it, because that's all you get. God says, Zippo reward from me. He said, therefore, when you do their alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee as the hypocrites do in the synagogues. How many are going to give 1,000 today? 2,000. How many are going to? Sounds like an auction. They have the glory of men. Verily I say unto them, guess what? They have their reward. That's it. You ain't getting no more. I know that's not good English. But he says, verse 4, the Father which seeth in secret, he shall reward you openly. Is God going to reward you? Yes, God does reward when people give and bless and do things he asks them to do. And he says, what? I'm going to reward you. And when you get blessed, everyone's going to see it. And he says, even your enemies that try to destroy you, they're going to have to watch you get blessed. Then he's talking in verse 5 about praying. How are you supposed to pray? Don't pray just, some people pray these loud prayers just when they come to church. They don't ever pray any other time, but they go on forever, or they say grace until the food's cold. As the hypocrites are, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues, in the corners of the streets, what? That they may be seen of men. Here's again, they have their reward. And then God says he's going to reward us in secrecy. Then in verse 7, when you pray, don't use vain repetitions. I decree and I declare. I decree and I declare. All these vain repetitions. Just what? To be heard for their much speaking. Be not therefore like unto them, for your Father knoweth what things you have need of even before you ask. And then he says, this shows us how we're supposed to pray, and according, it's humble. It's glorifying him. It's not glorifying us, our church, our ministry, our political party. All these things have gotten so out of hand. He says, your kingdom come. Give us this day. Forgive us our debts. In verse 16, he talks about how do you fast. He's talking about giving. He's talking about praying. He's still talking about the right motive. He's talking about fasting here. Yeah. And then he says, how you fast? He said, do it unto your Father, which is what? He's going to reward you. God will reward it when we do things unto him. We don't live in the culture of just trying to be seen, to be noticed. Now big is so great. A lot of it is just, there's not going to be any rewards. Do it with the right heart. Do it with the right motive. Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, in verse 20, where neither moth nor rust are corrupt. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And then he talks about being, what are we supposed to do? Keeping our focus on him. Because no man can serve two masters, verse 24. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will hold to the one and despise. You cannot serve God and mammon. You cannot serve God and money. You can't. You've got to serve the one or the other. Unfortunately, we have many today that have sold out. Then Luke 18, and I don't think we're going to go through that, but this talks about the Pharisees, and he thought he was better than the publican. And he just talked about how great he was. I fast. I do all these things. I. See the narcissism in that? It's all about me. It's all about me. And then when God tells him to go, he said, you don't get a reward. Same thing. He said the one that was humble and dependent, he's the one that'll be blessed. But the Pharisee got absolutely nothing. So Philippians 2:3, do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind regard one another as more important than ourselves. This is what we got to teach our children while we still can. Teach other people's. It's more important. Think about the whole group here. Now, narcissism in the church, many leaders are hardworking and sincere and humble, and I want to give a warning here. We need to support the true, real, humble, God-given pastors. Because if we don't, they're not going to be around. Because the other ones are snuffing them out, they're going to be gone. So we have to take care of, and wherever these YouTubes go, if you have a real pastor in this hour, you're blessed. because more and more are selling out because of the business, because of other things, but they aren't willing to speak truth because it's going to cost them something. And it will cost us a lot in these end times, but what are we here for? You know, really, this is the purpose, is to speak truth. So I want to give you that this warning is not about this kind of pastor. This message isn't for the good pastors. This message is for the narcissistic leaders, and next week as we get into the narcissistic parents. But we're talking today about bullies. We used to call them jerks, the manipulators, the domineering, controlling leaders and fathers and mothers. They refuse correction, and they have little tolerance for struggling people. Think about Jesus, God, he died for the struggling, hurting, brokenhearted. These type of leaders have no time for your struggles, no time for your problems. In fact, they kind of use you as a paper towel. Next. Submit or get out. They lack empathy. They aren't team players. It's sad to see this in parents, and it's sad to see this in ministers, but you see it everywhere, that this spirit's prevalent, the Jezebel spirit, but they're not team players. They don't care about what, to have a good group, you need to hear from a lot of people. You can't just have one person controlling and dominating and having a vision and no one else can speak into that vision. It's like an elephant in the room. No one wants to talk about how bad that leader really is. Everyone's got there's a fear of silence. I mean, you just can't even talk. There's like a strange silence. Nobody can talk about. There's a secretiveness that goes on. But as they lack empathy, they aren't team players. They're not mentors. They're more concerned about their role in someone stealing it, so they're not going to train anyone else up. Does that make sense? They don't appreciate others' point of view. Now, a normal person appreciates another point of view because we know we have blind spots and we know we have flaws and we know we're not perfect. But the narcissistic personality person is so full of shame and guilt and fear, they put on a false self that they're perfect. They don't have time for you. Your opinion doesn't matter. It's really what they need. But because of their thinking and their damaged emotions, they don't know what they need. And they won't judge themselves, and they won't receive correction. So narcissists have predictable patterns. They do the same things over and over. And I want to give you some of these thinking and behavior patterns because this will help us deal with them. And some of this here is from Dr. Les Carter. I want to give him credit for this. They do not understand the essence of love. And I was dealing with this one narcissist, and he says, I don't know what love is. And I just thought, I love you by faith. I was like, what? They really don't have a real essence of knowing what love is. Love is giving and receiving, but they don't know the basics of love, giving and receiving, they don't get, okay? Like we have compassion, we have affirmation, we accept each other. Narcissists, they put you very high standards, and if you don't meet those standards, now all of a sudden they don't have time for you. And maybe they won't tell you it, but they will treat you like it. They will ignore you. They will not want to spend time with you. Even though they start off, it's like a great chocolate cake. You take a couple bites and it's great, but as you eat on, it's like, ugh. That's what a relationship with them is like. To them, love means you have met conditions. If you're good, dog love, you get a bone. They say, I love you for the moment, you've met their conditions. If not, they withdraw and have nothing to do with you. You've all heard about the silent treatment. It's not healthy love. Healthy love is we know it. We all have flaws, we all miss it, we adjust, but with a narcissist in a relationship with them, you do all the adjusting. That's not normal, that's not right. The other thing you're going to find in all of them, they don't know how to trust. And this is sad because they don't trust God either. They don't know how to trust because whatever their childhood was like, people let them down maybe, and I do feel bad. We can all feel bad for these people, but you also know there's a difference between feeling bad and then actually stepping over boundaries to try to help them, and they don't want help. They don't know how to trust. There's no safe haven. Well, I can trust you. I trust your word. These people, there's no one in their life that they really, really trust. Isn't that sad? So there's no safeness. Their defensive interaction is always on guard. They have a very low ability to receive input. And if you're on a staff of some of these leaders, you have to almost approach them like it was their idea. Because if it was their idea, oh yeah, like you said, you make it all about them, then they receive it. Otherwise, they don't want your input. Isn't that sad? Have you dealt with some of these people? Yes. They don't have trust in their skill set. Isn't that sad? They don't have trust. They do not cultivate relationships. Around true narcissistic people, you're not going to find, they can high five and they can have fun and they can have real shallow relationships, but they have no wiring for intimacy. Intimacy means see into me. You can share with them your stories, but they say, I don't have much to say. Or they'll just grandiose make up these stories to make you feel like they're really something special. But as far as being vulnerable, really telling you their faults, it's not going to happen. They're not intimate people. They don't have great relationships. And you'll see that many times as they get older and ready for death, they have very few people around them because their real true self starts coming, this pattern. You'll think it's just you. It's just me, and you'll see that they start treating other people. It's a pattern in their life. They don't cultivate relationships. They think you're useful today. Good, you're useful for me today. But when you're not useful for them, they will discard you, dismiss you, insult you. You're not important. Another one, they're not really thankful. They've never cultivated a thankful spirit or a thankful heart. Most people, when you do something for them, you're thankful. You're so thankful, and develop this in your children. Thankfulness. With them, it's like, well, I deserve it. It's about time you gave me that. It's about time. So there's not a thankfulness because they feel they deserve it. In fact, they said, why didn't you give me this earlier? I've been waiting for this. It's not a thankful heart. So think about it. Here you're dealing with a damaged person, doesn't know how to love, doesn't know how to trust. They don't know how to have relationships. They're not thankful. Then they're driven by shame and devaluation. They were probably devalued as children and not validated by their fathers or their mothers. So now they had to get one up. So now they're going to do the same thing. It's a pattern, and now they have to be above you, so they're going to devalue you. And they always love to play the one-up man game. So they don't have love, trust. They keep a facade or a mask up. They can be very loving. And this is the thing. You have to have discernment. But you'll always have an agitation. They're unapproachable. Many of them are like, they'll say, hi, how are you? How's the family? Then that's it. They have nothing else really to say. They have no depth. Then they love to control you. If you're married to one of them, they love to tell you how to think and how to act, how to behave. Don't let a person with all that damage dictate who you're going to be. You're going to have to separate yourself. Sometimes if you can leave a job like that, it's time, you got to leave. Because they do cause you mentally health problems because you're always trying to do better, be better. If I can just please them, and they're not pleased themselves, so you can't please them. They're unpleasable. Now, another one is 8 lies the narcissist wants you to believe. Now, these are untruths, but these are lies. If you could get into their head, this is what they believe. They're fear-based people. So they really believe I'm truly superior to you. I'm superior. They fear vulnerability. If there is a problem, it's you. They never will take responsibility for their own issues. It's always your fault. Now, there are times it is our fault, but how many know it's not healthy for someone to blame you all the time? But if you live with these people or work with these people, and I've dealt with staff people, they feel so ashamed and worthless. By the time they're done with that boss, they feel they have no self-esteem left because they were never valued. They were never praised. And this happens in churches all the time. These people, they end up wounded and they leave and they won't go back to another church. They were so abused while they were on staff. This is another lie they believe. You're supposed to give your power over to me. You have power, but I want it. In other words, they're going to control you. I require you to think like me. This is why if you go into some of these churches and you try to challenge them, you're the problem now, because they don't like to be challenged. And then they do their little purge campaigns. Time to get rid of so-and-so, causing a little problem over here, so they can keep their little control kingdom. Another lie, they believe you're nothing without me. Dealing with people trying to get out of these relationships, you'll never make it. Nobody will ever care for you. They try to beat them down so much that they will never leave, because they'll feel no one else could ever want me. I'm just such a nothing. And if you haven't dealt with this in your life, you're blessed. But almost every one of us here have, I know. It's your job to keep my ego puffed up. This is what they believe. It's your job. If you work for me, it's your job. If you're married to me, it's your job to keep my ego propped up with lots of compliments. That's called narcissistic supply. They have a need to be told how great they are. It's because they're empty inside. And this is why I say, I don't know if they have walks with God or not, because God fills us up and we get our life from the inside. These people everything has to come from the outside. All their validation, all their narcissistic supply. And if I'm not getting it from this one, I'll go get it from that one next. We're normal people that don't have this personality disorder. We don't think this way. We thank God if you get a compliment, but you don't live on them. That if you don't get them, you just can't. You have to have them. Another lie, they believe you owe me. If they do something for you, if it's a true spirit of narcissism, this Jezebel spirit, they believe you owe them. You owe them. So if they give you something, look out, because it's always got a string attached to it. Your feelings and opinions are irrelevant. They don't matter. I could write a book on this one. It's your fault. They keep themselves in a superior position, so everything is your fault. They look down on you, and it's always your fault. So if you let these lies get inside of you, you're going to start believing these lies about yourself. But if you know the inside of a narcissist, this isn't you, don't receive what they're trying to tell you. Does that make sense? And this is another lie they believe. This is truths to them. You're making my life miserable. They are great victims. And always play the victim cards. The covert narcissist, the innies, always play its victim. It's, they were so mean to me. They did this and they did this. And they love to talk behind your back. They're cowards. Most of them won't tell you stuff to your face, but they build a whole line of gossip and rumors behind your back because they don't have enough guts to tell you to be honest or be vulnerable, but then they start believing lying spirits themselves. So they believe that you're making their life miserable when actually they're doing it to themselves. They self-sabotage every victory they have. There's a whole thing on self-sabotage that they do to themselves. How do we respond to these kind of people? Sometimes we all think we can correct them, we can change them. Because they're so poor self-aware, they're not aware, they won't be accountable, they won't be honest. The only time sometimes they'll be honest and come clean is when you're going to leave them, if they still need you. Then all of a sudden you're going to get the apologies or please don't go or whatever. But most of the time they'll have the honeymoon phase, which lasts for a little bit, but then they really don't change. It's not a permanent change. So don't try and correct them. You have to lower your expectations with these kind of people. You will never have a true intimate relationship with them. They are not wired for it. They cannot. A lot of times if you're a mercy-motivated person, you always end up with these kind of people because they like what they see in you. They want what you have, and you think you can change them and help them and fix them. But it's got to be something they want. We can't make people want to change. They have to, get broken before God and want these changes in their life and have a permanency, not just a temporary, I'm going to keep you, so I'm going to tell you what you want to hear, baby, phase. But you got to keep your expectations low. If you work for somebody like this, don't expect them to come and tell you how great of a worker you are. Don't expect they're always going to tell you what you're not doing right. They're always going to tell you how you could be better. And they're never satisfied. The bar just keeps raising and raising and raising because they're not happy on the inside. You always wonder, when are they going to be happy? They're usually never happy. They have another fantasy that they got to reach, another goal that they got to reach. And if you're not the one, look out, because they got tunnel vision and they're going to get it done with or without you. Have you met anyone like this? Sometimes you need to get away from them. Don't let someone with this much damage dictate who you are. And I know that's true with a lot of people. Expose yourself to people who know you. You respond by being around people that love you, that care about what you're going through, that will listen to you, that authentically care for you. Minimize your exposure to these kind of people if you can. You cannot reason with an unreasonable person. Okay? You guys okay? Just giving too much information? I want to share a little bit about relationships here in closing. Bad relationships. They all have bad relationships. I don't care if the grandiose narcissist acts like he's wonderful, he's got the great image. You look behind closed doors and you're going to find bad relationships. And we'll go into that more next week. Bad relationships with their family, bad relationships with their kids, because they never validate their kids. They never give the kids themselves. They might give them stuff, but they don't give them them. How many know the most precious thing you can give your kids is you? Your time. Training them, helping them, mentoring them. They don't know how to mentor. They don't know how to give of themselves. So it's just they're bad relationships. They're not wired for loving or nurturers. You're not going to get any nurturing from these kind of people. They use people as objects and tools until they no longer need them. I don't know if you've ever been experienced where someone no longer needed you. They used you for a while to get where they are, and now they don't need you anymore. Poof, next. And they don't care how you feel either. No, you cannot have a normal person not care about somebody else's when you hurt them. It's normal. Are you okay? You'll never hear them saying, are you okay? There's just a hardness. There's a coldness. There's just a disconnect. And even when you try to talk to someone, there's an awkwardness. It's almost like they don't like talking to people. And some of the narcissists I know, they've come out and told me, I don't like people. I'm like, well, why are you in the ministry then? If you don't like people, get out, go sell cars or something. No, don't even do that. But they use people as objects and tools. God doesn't want his people used as objects and tools. They are not capable of a give and take relationship. You do all the adjusting and you're drained. They can be very giving to whoever they want to. Boy, if they got money, they can be giving you gifts. They can love bomb you. But there's always strings attached. And you have to admire them. They love to be seen. They love to give money to people. They love to be admired. They love to do things in public so they can get a lot of admiration from the public. Because they don't know how to trust. And remember, trust is so important. To have a relationship, you got to trust. To be in a good marriage, you got to have trust. To be in a good working relationship, you've got to have trust. They don't know how to trust. Trust is how we deeply connect with each other. So if they can't trust, there's not going to be any connection. And if you can't connect with them, guess what? It's not your fault. The wire is damaged and it doesn't work. You can try all you want to get that connection, but it's not going to work. They are manipulators. They like to control people in their lives. And this is probably one of the, I think about Samson and Delilah and how she manipulated and she told him what he wanted to hear and she got him where she wanted him and she, cut off his hair and she did all these, she was very manipulative and he fell for it. He fell for everything. And that's the thing with manipulators. They tell you what you want to hear. But he wasn't listening because there were times that she took off her mask and she was telling him what she was going to do. And same with the true narcissists, their masks will always slip. You will always eventually see their true selves. Believe it when they tell you who they are. Christians, we don't want to believe when we find out oh, no. What do? We give them another chance, and another chance, and another chance, and we stay longer, and we stay longer, and we're going to pray more, and we're going to fix it, right? I don't care how long Samson prayed for Delilah. Guess what? She wasn't going to be fixed. She had her eye on money, and she sold him out for money. She didn't care how he felt. He could have cried all day long. I bet you she didn't even go visit him when he had his eyes plucked out and he was... How many visits do you think she gave him? They're cold-hearted people, not wired for intimacy. They're manipulators. They like to control people in their lives. Very high standards that are unrealistic. They don't like dealing with conflicts or problems. This is hard when you're in a ministry with someone that will not be there for the right reasons. You know, I'm thinking of two of them right now. It's like nobody can work with them. And then when you come to them, the problems that people have dealing with them, it's always the other person's problem. But the problem is when they leave and another person comes in to help them, then they can't, the same problems happen. Oh, I don't want to deal with people. I don't want to deal with their problems. Well, they're the problem. And it's hard when they're the leader and they're the problem. Or it's hard when they're the mother and they're the problem. It's hard when they're the father and they're the problem. And the other thing I want to close with this, they can be abusive. And why are they abusive? Because they're very fragile. They're very fragile. They have very fragile egos. They hate to be ignored. Want to get a narcissist mad? Ignore them. Criticize them. They cannot handle. They're very rejection-based. And so they like to criticize you, but if you give them a taste of their own medicine, they can't handle that. They cannot handle being corrected. And if you try to correct them, guess what? You have now become the enemy. You're the enemy now. You're the problem. And if it's in a ministry and you're trying to bring correction or adjustment or balance to them, now you're the enemy. You're crazy. You're this. You're that. And if you don't have people around you to tell you that you can believe them because they're so manipulative and persuasive. But God doesn't want his people being abused. Do you like your kids being abused by someone? Think of how much God hates Pharisees abusing his children in his name, using the victim card. It's all about poor them. And you get around their flying monkeys, and these are the yes men around them, and they all have them. It's people that'll be there no matter what, but they will just defend them to the T. You know, it comes to a point where, you know what, everybody's got to be accountable for the way they think and the way they act. Amen. Right? God's saying, you know, we gotta know when is your stopping place. Now, because I've studied this in the last, I don't know how many years, narcissism, now when I see that, I know I can't have friendships with them. I can't work with them. Not that I wouldn't want to, but you can't help them. And so it saves you. And because we don't talk about it in church, we have so much abuse and manipulation and control going on in the name of God, and then no one stands up, and the one that stands up gets booted out, right? So we have to stand with the leaders that are standing with truth in this hour, because it's going to get worse in these end times. It's just like the true doctors. There's some doctors that won't go along with some of the stuff that's going on. I mean, if you find a good old doctor that stands for his standards, say, I'm not going to give you this drug because you don't need it. In fact, the side effects of this drug is worse than if what you're going through right now. And when you find one of those doctors, you thank God for them. You support them. You do whatever. Same with preachers. If you find preachers in your town, and if you can't, you know what? I'm telling you, start your own home ministry. But don't let a narcissist start it. Because if you get narcissists in that home group, it'll be divided and devoured. Within, you got to be careful, because you got to know these signs, because it's everywhere. And if you're not dealing with one, you know someone that is. And if you go to counselors and they don't know what narcissism is, you're going to get secondhand wounding. Now, not only the narcissist abuse you, but the therapist or the counselor doesn't have a clue what it is. So now they're going to abuse you too and say it's your fault. But people that are wise, that are understanding, that have wisdom, and they know what's going on, they know you're a victim. You are under narcissistic abuse, and I know how to help you. But you got to want help. You got to be free from entanglement. You got to say, I got to let go of this narcissistic person in my life. Some of them, you're married to them or you're divorced from them. You have to deal with them. Limit your exposure. Use wisdom. Get people around you. Get godly counsel. None of us can do life alone in this hour. We got to have godly friendships. Amen? Father, we thank you for your word, and we thank you, Lord, that this wouldn't bring condemnation to anyone, but it would help people see and give them eyes to see what they're going through, and that they'd come out of these dark pits of loneliness, thinking there's something wrong with them, or they're just sitting home. They don't trust any Christians anymore because they've been abused by a leader. Father, whatever this situation is, I just thank you for your blood to cover them, and that they would get back up and they would press on. It's a new year. We press on serving you and worshiping you. And we just take some of these people off their pedestals, and we see them for what they are. They're manipulators and abusers. But Father, we thank you, not all your leaders are that way. You have your shepherds. You have true shepherds out there. And for those other ones that have went into the ditch, that just have written off all Christianity, I just pray, Lord, they'd repent, they'd get back in the fold, they'd find good fellowship with eyes wide open and help other people get free in this hour. And everyone said? Amen. Amen.